Thanks everyone for joining. So this is our fifth session, which is the last session on this webinar series. So on this computational BIM Archicad now. Today we are going to see Ladybug Tools. We are going to do a sun study, and then we are going to do Windrow Study using Grasshopper components. You guys are familiar with Ladybug already. So on the session 2, we've seen how to use Ladybug. Today we are going to see how to do sun study path, and then the Windrows study. So, but before that, we'll see how to do the tiles from slab. On the last session, Chidam showed how to do tiling using Grasshopper by creating a cluster using a zone. Okay, now we are going to see how to create it using a slab from Archicad. Okay, so let's go straight into the demo. All right, so here is my Archicad, and I have a Rhino here, and then I have the Grasshopper open on the screen. Let me start the connection from Archicad. All right, the connection is started. So now I need to drag and drop the cluster that Chidam shared with us. So let me just drag and drop it here. So once I drag and drop, you can see the cluster. So if I right click and click edit cluster, I'll be able to see the entire cluster that Chidam has created. Okay. So we are going to use the same cluster to create tiles from these slabs. Okay, so let me just close this cluster. All right, so here are the names that Chidam shared with us. I mean, the names of the input, but it has been changed in the cluster. So let me try to rename them. Okay, so the first one is zone perimeter, but here we are going to use a slab. So let me just put slab perimeter. Okay, and then the next is reference point. And then the next one is tile orientation. And then the third one is tile size in X direction. And this one is tile size in Y direction. Okay. And this one is the grout size, that is the gap between the tiles. And then the next was tile thickness. Okay, and this one is it's a Boolean value. So remove first grout gap in X direction. Okay. So this is the number value. So this is the direction plus or minus for X. The next one is remove first grout gap in Y direction. Okay, the next one is direction plus or minus for Y. Alright, so the cluster is ready. So we have the extrusion. Once we pass in all the inputs into this cluster. So the first one is the slab perimeter. For that, we are going to this Archicad category. So under Archicad category, we have parameters. Under the parameter subcategory, we can bring in the slab component. So just drag and drop it here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and then set one slab in Archicad. Okay, selecting that, you will be asked to select the slab inside Archicad. I've selected that. Now going back again to Archicad, under the deconstruct, I need to deconstruct the slab here. Okay, so the slab that we have brought from Archicad, I'm going to deconstruct it. Okay, so once when I deconstruct it, I'm getting the polygon. So this polygonal curve is the is the perimeter of the slab. So we are just going to pass that inside. Okay, so the first parameter is passed. The next is reference point. Again, we need to input a point here. So let me just use this point. So I have my slab here. So I can choose any point in my slab. So let me just right click and then select any point here. Once you select it, you can just pass it to the reference point. Okay. So the next is style orientation. For that, we are going to use a number slider. Okay, so let me just use the natural numbers and then make the value from 0 to 90° maybe. Okay, and then I just pass it to the tile orientation. Later we can change the angle here. All right, the next one is also a number slider, which is the tile size in X direction. So let it be like 0.3 or something. And then let me copy this and make this 0.6. So let me pass the 0.3 value into the tile size in X direction and 0.6 in Y direction. Okay, so the next one is the grout size. So this can also be slider. Let me just make this value 0.05 or 0.02 or whatever. Okay, so let's just give an enter value of tile thickness. So you can use the same slider again to enter the tile thickness, or you can even use the panel. Okay, so the next one is a Boolean value. Let me just enter false for now. And then the direction is in direction plus or minus for X value is also a number. So we can just use panel here if you want, and then enter 1 here. Let me just resize the panel here and pass it inside. So copy these two and then we can just pass it inside for Y direction. Okay. So I have just put the input, it's loading. So it's actually calculating and creating the extrusion of the tiles based on the parameters that we have input here. It's taking a bit of time. It's still loading. I think it's taking a bit longer time. Maybe I will just move on to the next example. But if you see here, I just have to create the extrusion here. And after creating the extrusion, I just need to pass it to the morph under the design in Archicad category. So I just pass the extrusion inside the morph. which is the solid morph. And then once that is passed, we will get the morph created in here inside Archicad. We can change the layer, we can change the material of the morph using the morph settings component. Okay, let me just close this. It's taking a bit longer. All right, so let me open a new Rhino file. All right, let's move on to the next example using the Rhino Grasshopper. All right, so let me start with the next example. We are going to do a sun study. We are going to use Ladybug's tool. Sorry for the problem in the previous example. It was taking a bit longer to load. So we are just moving to the next example. So here is our Ladybug component or the category here. So here, if you see, we have visualized data. We have sun study, sun path. We have windrows. We can do the direct sun hours, calculate the direct sun hours. We can do a lot of simulations here using the Ladybug tool. So what I'm going to do today is I have a morph of a building, and then I also have the context of the building around, like the mesh. So I'm going to bring these two geometries inside Grasshopper, and then I'm going to bring in the, I mean, if I know the location of the building, I will be able to bring in the context or the surrounding environment of the building from the Cad Mapper website. And then I'm going to do a sun study. So let us see how to do that today. All right, so first is to bring the geometry from Archicad. So going to the Archicad tab, I need to go to the parameters. Here I have one morph and one mesh, so I am bringing both of them. One is the mesh and the other one is the morph. Okay, so right click here and then set the mesh in Archicad. So select the mesh here, and then the next one is to select the morph. Alright, both have been selected. Let us keep both aside first, and then we shall bring in the context. Okay, so for bringing in the environment, we have this website called Cad Mapper. So just go to cadmapper.com. What you can do is you can just create an account inside this website, and then once you create an account, you'll be able to come to this page. Okay, see here, if you see, you can select any area. If the area is less than 1 kilometer, this you can export or you can download the file for free. If it's more than 1 square kilometer, you have to pay and then download. Most probably for all our sites, I think it's less than 1 square kilometer. So let's just choose some place and then download the file. Okay, so let me just choose this place. If you see here, it's just 0.61 square kilometer. Okay, so which is less than 1 square kilometer. So I'll be able to get the file for free. And if you see here, you can choose the file type here. I'm choosing Rhino 5, and we can choose the 3D buildings, the topography to export, and also if you want the road geometry to be a mesh or outline or just the center lines, you can choose whatever you want. And then the highways to be 8 meters, major roads, you can change the dimensions of these values if at all required. And we have options here. If a building doesn't have any 3D or the height data, so it will automatically set the height of the building as 5 meters. Okay, So you can manipulate these values if you want to export it for your surroundings. Okay, so let me just choose this location and then click create file. So the file has been created. So you can see the 3D axonometric view here. So let me just download this. All right, once it is downloaded, okay, it will extract, it will download as a zip file. So I have extracted it. So here is the file. You can see it is a Rhino file. So what I can do is I can just go to my file, Rhino, and then go to the perspective here, and then I can drag and drop the Rhino file here. Okay. Once I drag and drop it, I'm just going to import this file into this file that we have already created. So just click OK, and you can see the file has been imported. So currently the perspective is in is a wireframe. So I'm just changing it to shaded. Okay, so you can see the context here with the topography and then the buildings around everywhere. Okay, so what we can do now here is we can just move this mesh that we have created and then the morph to the exact location where your project is. So for that, what I'm going to do is um, alright, so for I'm going to convert them as a brep. So for that, I need to deconstruct these mesh and then the morph. So deconstruct mesh we have under Archicad. So here we have deconstruct mesh. Okay, so just pass the deconstruct mesh component into the deconstruct mesh component, and then similarly deconstruct the morph. Okay, so we have the B-reps, that is the boundary representation of both the buildings of both the building and then the mesh. Okay, so now we can just convert them into a geometry and then pass it inside. So before that, what we can do is, all right, so first what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a brep component from the params and then pass these both inside the brep. So for passing two inputs to one node, I need to click shift and then I can pass so that I can just combine both together. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch off the preview of mesh and then the previous morph that we created. So I just have only the brep that we just created now. Okay, so let me right click this and then bake it. Okay, so once I bake it, it will become a component inside the Rhino file, inside the Rhino 3D view. Okay, so let me just switch off the preview. You can see this became a component inside the Rhino itself. So now I've selected both of them. I can just move them to the location wherever I want. So I'm using the handles here to move it to a location. Okay, so I'm placing it there. All right, so I've brought in my 3D data there of the mesh and then the building. Okay, so now I need to just use the Ladybug components and then do the sun study for the component for the entire building and then the mesh around there. Okay, so the first thing what I need to do is download the location, the weather URL. So just bring in that. So if you see here, it is asking me for the weather URL. So for that, what I need to do is I need to use the website as we have seen in the previous session. On the second session, we need to go to Ladybug Tools EPW map. So if you go here, you'll be able to log into the, you'll be able to zoom into the location where your project is in. So for us, we can just use the one in the file label. So we can just copy the link to clipboard. All right, so once we copy it, go back to Rhino, and then under param, we can just bring in a panel and then double click it and then enter the URL that we just copied in the EPW map. So you can just pass the weather URL into the weather URL input. Okay, so now this become the warning has gone. So we have the EPW file, and then I'm going again to the Ladybug. So now you need to get the location of the project. So for that, from the EPW file, you'll be able to get the location. Just pass the EPW file into the import location no component. You'll get the location of the project. All right. So the next is the sun path. So bring in the sun path from under the visualize data subcategory. Okay. So here we have the location input. Okay, so if you see here, there are multiple inputs. There are hyphens before and after the names of the inputs. So if there is a hyphen before, it means that it is a required information. Okay, or if there is a hyphen or the dash after the name of the input component, it means that it is optional. Okay, if we have on both sides, that is front and back, it means that it is required, but we have a default value saved inside. Okay, so that's the meaning of this dashes in these inputs. So for location, you can see it is a dash before the name of the node. So you can just consider that it is required information. Okay, so we are just passing the location inside, and rest all the data are either optional or it is required, but it has a default value. Okay, so that's what it means. So we have passed the location. Now we need to pass the hoist here. Hoist basically is to give the analysis period. So for giving the analysis period, we have analysis period node component, which is under the analyze data. So just drag and drop it here. So here you can just pass the hoist here. So basically the default value is set throughout the entire year, but for your study you can just limit it to like 1 day or just 2 days or a few months, however you want. So let's just use the number sliders again to set the month, date and hour of the study. So bring in a number slider and then change it to month. I'm going to use the natural numbers, so just starting from 1 to 12. Okay, so I can pass it to the start month, and then I can pass the same to the end month if my study is within the same month. Okay, so let's just consider this within the same month, and then let me just copy the number slider and then change it to days. Okay, again, the days is from 1 to 31st, and then click OK. So if the study is going to be on the same day, you can just use the same slider, or if you want to span it across different days, you can use a different slider and then pass it a value there. Okay, maybe from 1 to 6 or something, and then pass it to the end day. And then again, the next one is the hour. You can see the start hour 0 to 23. So again, I need to copy the number slider and then change it to hour. Okay, so this one is from 0 to 23. Okay, so let the hour be like 10 or something for the starting, and for ending, let it be around 15 or maybe 16. 18 should be fine. Okay, so I pass it to the start hour and then pass the second one to the end hour. Okay, so now we have decided the analysis period, and then now go back to the Ladybug category, and then under here we have direct sun hours under analyze geometry subcategory. Okay, so drag and drop that. So if you see here, the same rule is followed here. If it is a dash before, it is a required value. So we need to pass the vectors. So we have the vectors output from the sun path. We can pass it inside. Okay, and then the next is geometry. So the geometry of the sun study path in which we are going to do the sun study, and then the context is the buildings around the studying building. Okay, so we have the BREP here already. So maybe what we can do is we can just go to the params here and then bring in another BREP. Okay, so now we have the building here that we have just imported from Archicad, and then we moved it to this location. Okay, so let's just right click the BREP here and then set multiple BREPs and select this, select one more and then click enter. Okay, so the BREP has been set to this node, and then we can pass it to the geometry. Okay, all right, so the next input we can do is the context. So for the context, what we are going to do is we are going to select all the buildings around the around this and then pass it as the context here. So for selecting all the buildings, we are going to use the layers here. So if you see on the Rhino, they are using layers. So when we are importing the file from the Cad Mapper, it is having the layers set for buildings. So just click this and then right click. You can select all the objects. Okay, so you can pass all the selected value into the context here. So for that, again bring in a BREP. Okay, and then right click, select multiple BREPs. We have already selected the components there, so everything will be set to that BREP. Okay, so this can be again passed as the context. All right, the next input that is required here is the run input. So this is basically a boolean, so we just need to pass it. So let me just pass it inside and then double click this and make it true. Okay, so the next, sorry, there is one more input required, that is the grid size. So for that, I'm going to use a number slider again. So let me just make it like 0 to 10 and then make the default value like 4 meters or something, and then pass the grid size. So it will do a study for the grid size of 4 by 4. Okay, so now if you can see here, the warning is gone, and when I zoom into the building that we have just created, you can see the sun study being done. But before that, let me just maximize this. All right, so if you see here, this is the location of the sun. These points are the location of the sun in the analysis period that we have selected here. Okay, so if I move this, you can see the sun moving also. Okay, so if it becomes fourth month of the year, you can see the sun is directly above the building. Okay, so now you can see the structure that is shown here is away from the building. So what we can do is we can use the scale component here under the sun path node component, and then we can scale it to a size which we require. Okay, so again for scaling, use the number slider and then make it like 20 or something, and then let the default value be like 12 or 10 or something. So let's see how it scales up. All right, so it is quite big, so maybe I make it 6 or something. All right, so it's more or less the same size of our context around. So we can choose the center point now. So we can choose the center point using this input here. So for choosing the center point, again use the point component, drag and drop it here, choose the point, right click and set one point inside Rhino. Okay, so let us choose a point somewhere near the building and then pass it to the center point. So it takes a while to load. So once it is loaded, you can see the sun study is being done. And then when you zoom in, you will be able to see the direct sun hours. So let me just rotate a bit and then zoom in here. Okay, so you can see there are certain portion of the building which has lesser sun on it directly on the analysis period, and when it becomes yellow, it means that the sun is directly on that location. Okay, and when it is red, it's relatively having a medium sun above the building or the above the area of the building. Okay, so this is the sun study. If in case you want to have the sun study for the entire topography, what you can do is you can again bring in another brep or a mesh. So actually this is a mesh. So if I select the topo, it is actually a mesh. You can see one mesh added to selection. Okay, so it's a mesh. So for that, let me go to the params. Under geometry, you can bring in a mesh. Okay, so right click, set one mesh, and then select the mesh here. So now what you can do is you can pass it along with the geometry. So for passing more than one input, you just click the shift and then pass it. So it is loading. Now you can see the sun study has been done for the entire topography along with the building. Okay, so you can see the sun study of this entire topography. Okay, so this is how you can do the sun study, and you can do for multiple locations just in one folder, and then find out the sun's direct sun hours on the building. Okay, so the next example that we're going to see now is the windrow study. Okay, so let me just open a new file for it. Let me just close this. Right, I don't want to save this. So for windrow study, we need not have any context or any geometry of the building. We are just going to study the windrows based on the location of the project. Okay, so we don't need any geometry of the building for it. Okay, so let me just maximize it. Open the grasshopper. All right, so let me just go to the Ladybug Tools here, and then again we need to do the same. Just bring in the weather URL, and then from here copy it to the clipboard. So once copied, go back here and then use the param panel here, and then input the URL inside. Okay, so go back to the Ladybugs tool here. Now we got the EPW file. Now we need to get the it's the wind direction and then the wind speed. So for that, we can use this import EPW node. Okay, so if you see here, this is the import EPW component. So just pass the EPW file, and we also have this statistics file. So if you see here under the import, we have import stat. So here, these are some useful statistics based on the location. So if you just pass the statistics file into this import, you can see here there are, you can see the extreme cold week, extreme hot week based on the location. Okay, so let me just use the panel to see it. So let me just pass the location. You can see the location, it's showing the latitude, longitude, and then the elevation. Okay, and let me pass the extreme cold week. Say for example, you can see the extreme cold week is on the first month, on first day, to the first month of seventh day. Okay, between 0 to 23. So between the hours 0 to 23. This is the first week of the year is going to be the coldest week of the year in Singapore. So if we pass the extreme hot week, you can see it is someday between August 27th to September 2nd. So that is going to be the hottest week of the year. So here are some other useful information. You can just make use of. If you see here, heating design 99%. So that's how you can just use this input statistic, some useful information from there. Okay, so let me just delete it. It's not required for the Windrow study. For us, we are more concerned on the wind speed and then the wind direction. Okay, so let's go back to the LB tool again, and then you can see here under visualize data, we have windrows. So just drag and drop it inside the canvas. And again, as I told earlier, we have some information that is required for this input. So one is the wind speed and the other is the wind direction here. So the first one is the data, which is the wholly continuous collection of wind speed. Okay, so we can just pass the wind speed into this data, and then the wind direction, just pass it inside to the windrows component. All right, so you can see, let me just show the top view. You can see the wind study on the component on the location of the project. So you can see the speed meter per second. You can see there are it ranges from 0.1 to 11.8. Okay, so we have basically like 36 the direction or the 360 degree is divided into 336 times, so we can change that also. So let's see how to change that. And we also have the center point just we had for the sun steady path. So if you bring in a point and then choose any point here, say for example, let me choose somewhere here and then pass it to the center point, you can see it gets moved to that exact location. Okay. Okay, so here we also have the period. So currently this is for the entire year. Similarly, we can use the Ladybug tool or the analysis period here, just like what we did in the previous example. We can just pass the period for the wind study. Okay, so let me just choose the month and then enter one. That the default value is 1, and then the end month, the default value, let me change it to 2 or something. Okay, so if you see here on the first and the second month, the wind direction is going to be on only on the north. Okay, so for the entire year, we saw it is surrounding the entire building, but for first and the second month, the wind direction is going to be on this direction only, and then the speed of the wind is based on the legends that is shown next to this diagram. Okay, so we also have the north here, so we can use a slider to change the north if in case you are building if your true north is different. So you can just choose the number slider here and then change the value to natural number, which is ranging from minus 360 to plus 360. Okay, and then let's set a default value of say for 45 degree or something, and then pass it to the north. You can see it gets the north direction gets shifted towards 45 degree. Okay, so if based on your project's north, you can just shift the north here also. Okay, all right, so let me just show another example which I created. Right, it's opening. All right, it's loading. Yeah, it's loaded. So if you see here, I'm using the same concept here to do the wind study, but for the input of the period, we can choose the period from here. So say for example, if you want to just do the sun study for the summer, we can predefine the summer month. So maybe we can consider the summer from March to the August, and then for the winter, I'm considering from September to February, and then for the yearly entire year, I'm just passing it directly there without changing anything. And then for custom, you can let the users change the month, day, and hour. Okay, so based on the option that we choose here, let me just choose summer maybe. And then you can see on summer, that is from the third month to the eighth month, the wind study will be like this. The wind direction and then the speed of the wind will be like this. Okay, so if I change it to winter, you can see how it changes accordingly. And if I make it entire year, it will show the entire year's wind direction and then the speed of the wind. Okay, so this is something you can try on your own. So that's it about the wind study. So let me go back to the presentations. All right, so the demo is over. Follow us on the social media for more information. So you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And apart from that, we also have a YouTube channel, Graphisoft SG. You can just look for the recorded videos of these webinars in the channel. So we haven't put the last session yet. So we'll put the last session and the current one as soon as possible. Okay. So if you guys have any doubts, you can reach out to us on email. So let's go to the Q&A session. All right, looks like there are no questions yet. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. Yeah, the Ladybug tool takes into consideration the effect of the surrounding buildings. So that is how we choose the context. So we basically chose the surrounding buildings and then passed it inside as a context. So if the buildings are close enough, you will be able to see the side which the building is close enough with a blue color representation, which means the sun is not directly hitting that portion. Yeah. So for getting the context, you just need to use the Cad Mapper and then choose the location of the project and then export the file and then bring it inside your Rhino.